It feels like every day the world just throws more and more information at us, right? Especially about all these huge problems everyone's facing globally.
Yeah, it can be tough to even know where to start sometimes.
Exactly. We hear ya. So many of you have been asking for a way to really cut through the noise and get a grip on what's actually going on. So that's why for this deep dive, we're going to take a look at this State of World Need report from World Relief.
It's a really fascinating look at what they consider to be the biggest issues facing people around the world right now.
Yeah, it's like our attempt to give you a clear and concise, but also really thorough picture of most urgent things happening.
I think what's great about this material is how it presents these sometimes overwhelming issues on a very human level. It helps you connect with what people are actually going through.
Right. And the report doesn't just randomly list out problems. It focuses on 6 core areas we're going to break down for you.
Perfect. Let's hear it.
Okay, so first, of course, we got to start with hunger.
Obviously, a huge one, right?
Then there's what they call thirst, which is basically the critical lack of clean water.
Right.
Then we'll dig into the experience of being a stranger, which is all about the worldwide refugee crisis.
That one is so complex.
Then we'll get into the lack of clothing, which is something that's often overlooked.
Definitely.
Next, we've got the issue of sickness,
Mhm.
which is so pervasive in many parts of the world.
Absolutely.
And finally, we'll wrap up with the often hidden reality of being in prison, which is something that doesn't always get talked about enough.
This report really digs into all of that. I'm excited to jump in.
It's a really broad picture, but it helps us to really grasp where help is needed the most.
It's also really interesting how this whole report has this underlying perspective throughout it.
Oh yeah, totally, like a foundation.
Right, like right at the beginning, they quote that powerful passage from Matthew 25.
About serving the least of these.
Exactly, where serving those in need, the hungry, the thirsty, the stranger, the naked, the sick, and the imprisoned, is directly linked to serving Jesus himself. It sets up this whole ethical framework for the issues they're talking about.
Yeah. And for anyone who hasn't memorized that whole passage, these 6 things we're going over are the same ones Jesus lists out there.
It's almost like a checklist.
So let's get into that first critical area we mentioned, hunger. And when we talk about hunger here, we're not just talking about like, oh, I missed lunch today.
Yeah, more like chronic hunger.
Right. This is a persistent reality for almost 2 out of every 3 people on the entire planet.
Wow.
Just let that sink in for a second.
That's a truly immense scale. And when you look at the actual numbers, it's even more startling. We're talking 750 million people worldwide who are chronically undernourished.
It's not just like an occasional grumbling stomach.
Yeah.
It's a constant lack of the food they need to be healthy.
And the impact that has on children is just heartbreaking. This report says that over half of all deaths of children under 5 years old are linked to malnutrition.
It's difficult to even wrap your head around that.
It's tragic. And they highlight this other statistic that's really hard to hear. 10% of those deaths are directly because of severe malnutrition.
Wow.
It's a daily human cost. The report says over 30,000 children die each day from hunger and things related to it.
It's not just numbers, it's real lives lost.
So what's at the root of this massive problem?
That's what's so fascinating about this report. They lay out all these different factors that all kind of intertwine together to create this poverty that leads to hunger.
Right, like a web.
Exactly. So you've got things like the super unequal way that wealth is spread around the world.
Haves and have-nots.
Then there are also just the straight up limitations in some places due to climate or geography where it's just harder to grow food.
Yeah.
And then you can't ignore the impact of greed. Then there's this complex issue of work ethic that plays out differently in different cultures.
That makes sense.
Then there's the sheer number of people in some areas, like the population density is a real problem.
Of overpopulation.
And on top of all that, you've got political maneuvering that sometimes disrupts vital food supplies.
Yeah, I can see how all that would contribute.
And to add even more to the mix,
Yeah.
there's also the lack of proper technology in some agricultural sectors, making it harder to grow enough food.
Uh-huh.
And of course, you can't forget about good old unemployment, where people simply don't have the means to buy the food they need.
Wow, so it's not just one thing.
It's this whole system.
It's like they're all connected. And what's crazy is that, as this report points out, the world actually produces more than enough food to feed every single person.
That's what blows my mind.
The problem isn't a shortage of resources. It's that the way we distribute food is totally messed up.
The numbers really highlight that imbalance. Did you know that industrialized nations, which is only about 20% of the world's population, consume a whopping 80% of the world's food.
Seriously.
It's insane.
That's such a huge disparity, especially when you compare it to the situation in wealthier countries. Like, the report says that here in the U.S., we spend something like $30 to $50 billion every year just on diets and dealing with problems from being overweight.
It's crazy. We're spending billions to eat less while people are starving.
It's a real paradox.
And it's not just a difference between rich countries and poor countries either. Even within poorer nations, the wealthy elite often contribute to this problem.
Yeah, because often when a country's economy improves, it's the already wealthy people who benefit the most.
But, it's not all doom and gloom. The report actually highlights some positive trends. Like since 1970, both the percentage and the number of people dealing with chronic hunger in developing nations has actually gone down.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. Back in 1970, there were about 918 million people, which was 35% of the population in developing countries who were struggling with chronic hunger. By the 1990s, that number dropped to 841 million, which was about 20%. So it's still a lot, obviously, but it shows progress is possible.
That's encouraging. And the report actually talks about a really promising solution to this hunger problem called microfinance.
Or sometimes it's called microcredit.
Can you explain how that works?
Sure. It's pretty simple, actually. The idea is to give out very small loans, often starting at like just $50, to people in poverty so they can set up a small business or grow one they already have.
I see.
So they might use that money to sell food, make things to sell, or offer some kind of service in their community.
Makes sense.
Then the money they earn from their little business lets them pay back the loan and, most importantly, actually feed their families.
So it's not just a handout, it's a way to help people help themselves.
Exactly. And the cool thing is often when people do well, they can then take out a slightly bigger loan, grow their business even more, earn even more money, and some even end up hiring other people.
It creates jobs.
And then those people can get loans and start their own businesses, and it just has this ripple effect.
I love that. So it creates this sustainable cycle.
That's what makes microfinance so impactful. The money gets repaid and can then be loaned out to someone else. So that initial tiny investment just keeps multiplying over time.
That's so smart.
And the research backs it up.
Ugh.
The report says that microfinance is really helping to make people less vulnerable to poverty, leading to better nutrition, more kids going to school, and better overall health.
That's fantastic. It seems like such a practical and effective approach.
All right, so let's move on to another one of those essential things we need as humans: water.
Or the lack of it, which this report calls thirst.
It's something so many of us take for granted. Turn on the tap, clean water comes out. But this report highlights how crucial water is for literally every single part of our bodies.
Like our blood.
Our brains, our muscles, even our bones are mostly water.
It's easy to forget.
And we don't just use it for drinking. We need clean water to grow our food, prepare our meals, and just keep ourselves clean.
Basic hygiene.
Right. And when people don't have that, it causes all sorts of problems.
And so many people are facing this. Over 1 billion people around the world don't have access to safe water sources.
Can you imagine?
It's mind-boggling. And it's so different from what we're used to.
Here, we can just walk to the sink and get all the clean water we want.
Right.
But in so many places, people have to walk for miles just to get water.
It's often women and children carrying those heavy containers, taking hours out of their day.
And sometimes they walk all that way and there's no water at all.
It's a major crisis.
So the report kind of breaks down this water problem into two main issues. You've got the problem of quantity, which is mostly in those super dry climates like parts of Africa and India. And desertification makes this even worse, like in the Sahel region where the desert is expanding like 9 miles every year.
9 miles a year? That's crazy.
It's like the desert swallowing up their land.
So quantity is a huge issue in those places, but there's also the problem of water quality, even if you can find water.
Right.
Sometimes the water that's available is contaminated with all sorts of nasty stuff that makes people sick.
Like bacteria, viruses, parasites, you name it.
Exactly.
And that causes all sorts of horrible diseases like typhoid, cholera, dysentery.
Ugh. And this is often made worse because they don't have access to proper sanitation or good hygiene practices either.
Right.
And there are so many things that cause this contamination.
Oh, yeah, it comes from everywhere.
Like in rural areas, it's often human waste or animal waste from livestock getting into the water supply.
And in those areas with more farming, soil erosion is a big issue.
Yeah, and then you've got all the chemical fertilizers and pesticides that run off into the water, too.
Which is ironic because those are meant to help with food production.
And as countries industrialize, there's more industrial waste polluting the water.
Which often ends up hurting the poorest communities the most.
It's like this sad trade-off where a country's economy might be doing better, but it's at the expense of the environment and the poorest people.
Plus, the demand for clean water just keeps increasing, with more people on the planet and more industries popping up.
It's a problem that's not going away anytime soon.
Okay, so let's shift gears now and talk about the experience of being a stranger, which is how this report describes what it's like to be a refugee.
Being forced to leave your home, not knowing if you'll ever go back.
The report calls them the ultimate victims of war and oppression.
And there are so many different things that force people into that situation.
It's not just one thing.
There's war, of course, and then there are all those internal conflicts and civil wars happening within countries.
And sometimes people are targeted and persecuted just for their race, religion, nationality, or even just belonging to a certain group.
And sometimes people's own governments fail to protect them or even oppress them.
It's happening everywhere, on pretty much every continent.
It's a global crisis. And what's challenging is that the numbers are constantly changing because new crises are always emerging.
Right. Some refugees might eventually go back home or find somewhere else to resettle, but then new conflicts pop up and displace even more people.
And on top of that, even trying to define who is and isn't a refugee is super complicated.
Yeah, it's super political.
Like the report says, one country's refugee might be another country's illegal immigrant.
The UNHCR, which is the UN Refugee Agency, estimated back in 2006 that there were 32.9 million persons of concern around the world.
Persons of concern.
Yeah, that's how they put it.
Meaning?
It included 9.9 million refugees and another 744,000 seeking asylum.
That's a lot of people.
And each of those numbers represents a real person who's been through a lot.
And their needs are so vast.
Yeah, it's not just one thing they need.
Like the report talks about how many refugees struggle with health problems from not having enough food or clean living conditions.
And then, of course, there's the lack of food itself, inadequate shelter, no money, and all the emotional and psychological trauma from being forced from their homes and having to adjust to a completely new culture.
It's hard to even imagine.
But the report also highlights some amazing organizations that are doing great work to help.
Oh, that's good.
Like Habitat for Humanity.
Oh, yeah, they build houses.
Right. They're doing amazing work to provide housing solutions all over the world for vulnerable people.
Incredible.
On World Relief, which we mentioned before, has helped resettle more than 215,000 refugees.
Wow.
And it's not just giving them a place to live, it's also about supporting them as they rebuild their lives.
Now let's move on to something that's often overlooked when we think about global needs. Clothing.
Yeah, it's easy to forget about something so basic.
The report does a good job of making it real by putting us right in the middle of a crisis.
I know what you're talking about.
Imagine hearing gunshots and screams all around you, seeing your neighbors' homes on fire, and being forced to run for your life with nothing but the clothes you're wearing.
Terrifying.
And that's the reality for so many people in war-torn areas. Like what's happening in Darfur, Sudan right now.
It's horrific. Entire villages are being wiped out, and families have to flee with nothing.
It's not just war, though. Natural disasters can be just as devastating.
Oh, absolutely.
Things like droughts, floods, cyclones, earthquakes.
All that can leave people homeless and without any of their possessions, including clothes.
And it's scary how often those things happen. Did you know that over 90% of all the deaths and damage from natural disasters come from those four things?
Seriously.
And over half of all natural disasters are those meteorological events, like storms, floods, droughts, extreme temperatures.
It's crazy how powerful nature can be.
And for developing countries, those natural disasters can really set them back. It often wipes out any progress they've made.
It's like starting over from scratch.
And the human toll is enormous. Thousands die every year, tens of thousands are injured, and hundreds of thousands are left homeless.
And right after those disasters hit, food and water can be cut off or contaminated, power goes out, hospitals and clinics are destroyed.
It's chaos.
And the effects are long-lasting. You've got the risk of diseases spreading, huge financial losses from damage to property and crops, and those developing nations have such a long road to recovery.
And they often started from a place of poverty and lack already.
Right, so the report emphasizes that to really help these places, it takes more than just sending supplies after a disaster. It takes long-term help, real investment in rebuilding and making things even better than they were before.
Let's turn now to the global issue of sickness.
Another massive one.
The report specifically mentions malaria, tuberculosis, and parasitic infections as some of the biggest problems in developing countries.
It's so sad that millions of people die every year from diseases that we can prevent or treat.
And a lot of these are diseases that are pretty rare in wealthier countries, like tetanus and measles. We have vaccines for those here, but in other places they can be deadly.
One of the clearest signs of how healthy a country is its average life expectancy.
How long people live?
And there's a huge difference between developed and developing countries,
How big of a difference are we talking?
like 15 to 25 years. That's how much shorter the average lifespan is in developing countries.
That's a big chunk of life.
It's a lot of years lost.
And this report does a good job of breaking down the different types of diseases that are most common.
They talk about those fecally related illnesses that spread through dirty water and poor sanitation.
Not like those diarrheal diseases we talked about earlier.
Then there are the airborne diseases like tuberculosis, pneumonia, measles.
And then we can't forget about those vector-borne diseases, the ones spread by insects.
Like mosquitoes with malaria.
Or the tsetse fly with sleeping sickness.
And then there's another whole category, the sexually transmitted infections.
With AIDS being the most well-known, sadly.
It's had such a terrible impact, especially in sub-Saharan Africa.
The numbers in this report from 2007 are just staggering.
33.2 million people living with HIV/AIDS globally.
And 22.5 million of those were in sub-Saharan Africa.
And at that time, over 6,800 new infections were happening every single day, with over 5,700 deaths every day from the disease.
It's hard to comprehend that scale of suffering.
And it all comes back to poverty, according to the report.
Yeah, it's like the root cause of so much sickness.
You've got crowded and unsanitary living conditions, no clean water or toilets, cramped homes, not enough food, which weakens people's immune systems, and just a general lack of knowledge about how to stay healthy.
Not to mention, healthcare is often out of reach.
The report says that over 80% of rural areas and poor parts of cities don't even have basic health care.
And a healthcare that does exist is often concentrated in cities where most poor people can't get to it.
But even with all this, there are some bright spots. The report talks about the incredible progress that's been made in preventing and treating certain diseases.
That's encouraging.
Like, do you remember that pill Merck developed to fight river blindness?
No.
Well, by 1997, they had already treated 22 million people with it.
Wow.
And they partnered with the Carter Center to distribute it, so that was huge.
That's amazing.
And things like oral rehydration therapy have saved countless lives by preventing kids from dying from diarrhea.
Such a simple solution that makes a huge difference.
And then there's the global push for vaccination. By 2008, over 75% of kids worldwide were getting the DTP vaccine.
So there are things that work.
Now, the last area we're going to talk about is a tough one, being in prison.
Yeah, it's not an easy topic.
But the report shares this really disturbing story about two women in Pakistan, Salima and Rahila.
What happened?
Well, they were both Christians who were persecuted for their faith.
Terrible.
Salima was imprisoned and beaten, and she was even raped.
Oh my.
And Rahila was executed just for refusing to give up her belief in Christ.
Unbelievable.
And then, to make matters even worse, Salima was charged with murder, even though it didn't make any sense.
So they made up a charge to keep her in prison.
Sadly, these kinds of situations are happening more and more around the world. And it's really hard to track how many Christians are being imprisoned because they're often arrested on other charges.
Like political or criminal charges, right?
Exactly. So the actual number of people imprisoned for their faith could be much higher than what we know.
That's a good point. It's probably really underreported.
There's this report from International Christian Concern that says more Christians were killed for their faith in the 20th century than in all the previous centuries combined.
Wow.
And they say that almost 2/3 of Christians alive today face some form of persecution.
From discrimination all the way to violence and imprisonment.
Right. It's not just happening in one place. It's a global issue.
They talk about this example in China where leaders of house churches are often imprisoned and tortured.
Like Pastor Zhu Guxing, who was thrown in jail over and over and tortured.
What did he do?
He was leading people to Christianity. But they put him in a cell with violent criminals and then kept him in solitary confinement.
That's terrible.
It's a stark reminder of the very real dangers that people face for their faith.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, after hearing about all these huge problems, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and just think, what can I even do about any of this?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's like a natural response to hearing about all this suffering. The report even talks about this feeling of helplessness.
Right. It's easy to just shut down and think that nothing you do will matter.
But the report makes it clear that that's not the answer. We can't just ignore these problems.
I agree.
And one of the key things they emphasize is how all these problems are connected. Like the physical needs are tied to the psychological needs and the spiritual needs.
So you can't just address one thing and expect it to fix everything.
Right. They say that real development work has to address the whole person.
We have to care for the whole person.
And while it's true that no one person can solve these huge global problems on their own, that doesn't mean we should just give up.
I love that quote from Ron Sider that they use. He says, "Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something, and together we can change the world."
It's so true.
Even small actions can make a difference when we all work together.
The report really challenges those of us who live in wealthier countries, especially those of us who follow the Bible, to think about our responsibility to the poor and suffering around the world.
We can't just ignore them.
They made this really interesting point. They say that the estimated cost to provide basic education, healthcare, and clean water to everyone in developing countries is somewhere between $30 and $40 billion per year.
That's a lot of money.
But then they point out that the world spends about that same amount on golf every year.
Wow.
So it's not that we don't have the resources, it's about how we choose to use them.
It really makes you think about your priorities.
In the end, the report brings it back to those individual actions that might seem small, but they really do make a difference.
Like what kinds of things?
Like giving someone a loaf of bread if they're hungry,
So simple, but so important.
or helping someone get access to clean water,
That's huge.
or providing shelter for someone who's homeless.
Or sharing a message of hope and faith with someone who's struggling.
And they tie it all back to that verse from Matthew 25 where Jesus says, "Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me."
It's a good reminder that when we serve others, we're serving God.
So to wrap up this deep dive, we've looked at these 6 critical areas of need around the world: hunger, thirst, being a stranger, lack of clothing, sickness, and being in prison.
6 huge interconnected problems.
And what really stood out to me is that we actually have the resources to address these issues.
There are solutions out there.
It's not about a lack of resources, it's about having the will to use those resources to help those in need.
That's a powerful takeaway.
So we want to leave you with something to think about. As you've been listening to us talk about all these challenges, was there one that really stood out to you?
Yeah, what really resonated with you?
And what might even just one small step look like for you to make a difference in that area?
You don't have to solve everything, just do something.
Because as this report makes clear, even though the problems seem huge, people all over the world are finding ways to make a real and lasting impact.
So what will you do?